Ethan's heart pounded louder than the cell block's iron doors slamming shut. He stood frozen, staring at the gray walls of Haverford Penitentiary, his new home for the next 5 years. Coming out as gay in a place like this felt like signing his own death warrant, but the truth had clawed its way out anyway. It happened on his third night, during a restless moment in the mess hall. The air was thick with the smell of overcooked stew and the low hum of guarded conversations. Ethan, lean and pale with a mop of chestnut hair, sat alone, his tray untouched. Across the room, another inmate, a wiry guy with sharp green eyes, watched him. Caleb, that was his name, whispered among the men for his quiet defiance. Ethan hadn't meant to stare back, but when their eyes met, something electric sparked, a dangerous current in a place that thrived on fear. You got a problem? Caleb's voice cut through the din, low but steady. Heads turned, and Ethan's pulse spiked. He could have ducked his head, played it safe. Instead, he held Caleb's gaze and said, "No problem. Just noticing you." The words slipped out reckless, raw. A ripple of silence spread, then murmurs. Ethan's face burned, but he didn't look away. Caleb's lips twitched, not quite a smile, but close. In that moment, Ethan came out, not with a declaration, but with a look that said everything. And in Haverford, that was enough to make him a target. By morning, the whispers had spread like wildfire. "Faggot," hissed a burly inmate named Kessler as he shoved past Ethan in the corridor. Ethan's stomach churned, but he kept his chin up, his mother's voice echoing in his mind. "Never let them see you break." She'd said it when he was 16, after his older brother, Nathan, caught him kissing a boy behind the school gym and called him a disgrace. Nathan, with his broad shoulders and righteous sneer, had made Ethan's life hell for years, until Ethan cut contact and moved across state lines. Now, in this concrete cage, Ethan was starting over, but the past clung to him like damp prison air. Caleb found him later that day in the library, a cramped room with peeling books and flickering lights. "You're either brave or stupid," Caleb said, leaning against a shelf, his voice a mix of amusement and respect. He was older, maybe 25, with a scar above his left eyebrow that made him look both tough and vulnerable. Ethan shrugged, trying to play it cool despite the heat rising in his chest. "Maybe both," he replied, and Caleb's laugh, low, unguarded, felt like a lifeline. They started talking, first about nothing, the food, the guards, the monotony. But soon, it was everything. Dreams they'd buried, fears they couldn't shake. Caleb had been locked up for 2 years on a robbery charge, a mistake born of desperation. Ethan, caught selling weed to pay for his mom's hospital bills, carried guilt like a second sentence. In the library's quiet corners, they carved out a fragile space where the world's rules didn't apply. Ethan learned Caleb's favorite book was The Catcher in the Rye, and Caleb teased Ethan for quoting poetry under his breath. Each conversation felt like stealing time from the prison's grip. But Haverford wasn't kind of softness. Kessler and his crew, hardened men with tattoos like battle scars, started circling. One afternoon, as Ethan left the library, Kessler pinned him against the wall, his breath sour with cheap tobacco. "You and your boyfriend think you're untouchable?" he snarled. Ethan's knees shook, but he spat back. "Jealousy's a bad look, Kessler." The older man's fist rose, but a guard's shout stopped it from landing. Ethan walked away, heart racing, knowing he'd only delayed the inevitable. Caleb, though, was fearless, or at least he seemed that way. That night, in the shadow of the courtyard's chain-link fence, he grabbed Ethan's hand, quick and defiant. "They want us scared," Caleb whispered, his breath warm against Ethan's ear. "Don't give him that." Ethan's fingers trembled in Caleb's grip, but he squeezed back, a silent promise. For the first time in years, he felt seen, not as a screw-up or a target, but as himself. Their connection grew in stolen moments, a brush of shoulders in line, a shared glance during work detail. Ethan started to dream of a life beyond the bars, one where he and Caleb could walk hand in hand without fear. But dreams were dangerous in Haverford, and Ethan's past was about to crash into his present. It was during a routine head count, 3 weeks after his arrival, that Ethan saw him. The new inmate shuffled into the cell block, head down, broad shoulders hunched. Ethan's breath caught, his world tilting. It was Nathan, his brother, the one who'd called him a freak, who'd turned their family against him. Nathan, now in the same orange jumpsuit, locked in the same hell. Their eyes met across the crowded room, and Nathan's face twisted in shock, then shame. Ethan's heart screamed one question. What the hell was Nathan doing here? The weight of that question pressed down as Ethan lay on his bunk that night, staring at the cracked ceiling. Nathan, the golden son, the one who'd always judged him, was now a prisoner too. Part of Ethan wanted to confront him, to demand answers. Another part wanted to run, to hide from the pain of their shared history. But Caleb's voice, steady and sure, echoed in his mind, "Don't give him that." Ethan closed his eyes, resolving to face whatever came next, not just for himself, but for the fragile hope he and Caleb were building in this unforgiving place. Ethan woke to the clang of metal and the shouts of guards, his mind still tangled in the shock of seeing Nathan. The cell block's fluorescent lights buzzed, casting harsh shadows on the faces of men who'd learned to hide their fear. Ethan wasn't one of them, not yet. His chest tightened as he dressed, knowing Nathan was somewhere in this maze of concrete and steel, a ghost from a life he'd tried to leave behind. In the mess hall, Ethan scanned the crowd, half expecting Nathan to appear. Caleb slid into the seat across from him, his green eyes sharp with concern. "You look like you saw a demon," he said, keeping his voice low. Ethan hesitated, then spilled it all. Nathan, the betrayal, the years of silence. Caleb listened, his jaw tight, and when Ethan finished, he reached under the table, brushing Ethan's knee. "You don't owe him anything," Caleb said, "but he got to deal with this or it'll eat you alive." Ethan nodded, but the words felt hollow. Dealing with Nathan meant facing the boy who'd once been his hero, before hate tore them apart. At 16, Ethan had worshipped Nathan, his confidence, his strength. But when Nathan caught him with that boy, his brother's disgust had shattered something Ethan hadn't known was fragile. Now, in Haverford, the past was a wound that wouldn't close. That afternoon, Ethan found Nathan in the yard, lifting weights under the watchful eyes of Kessler's crew. Nathan's blonde hair was cropped short, his face harder than Ethan remembered, but the resemblance was undeniable. Same blue eyes, same stubborn jaw. Ethan approached, his pulse hammering. "Nathan," he called, voice steady despite the storm inside. Nathan froze, the barbell clanging to the ground. For a moment, they just stared, two brothers trapped in a world neither had chosen. "What are you doing here?" Ethan asked, his voice low but sharp. Nathan's eyes darted to the other inmates, then back to Ethan. "Same as you," he muttered. "Screwed up." Ethan waited, expecting more, an explanation, an apology. But Nathan just grabbed the barbell and turned away. The dismissal stung, but Ethan caught the flicker of shame in his brother's eyes. Nathan wasn't just hiding from him. He was hiding from himself. Caleb was waiting by the fence when Ethan returned, his expression unreadable. "He talk?" Caleb asked. Ethan shook his head. "Not really. He's different. Or maybe he's the same, and I just forgot how much he hates me." Caleb's hand found Ethan's, a quick, hidden gesture. "He's the one locked in his own head," Caleb said. "You're not that kid anymore. You're stronger than he'll ever know." But strength felt like a lie when Kessler's crew started closing in. They caught wind of Nathan's arrival and the tension between the brothers. To men like Kessler, weakness was blood in the water. During work detail, as Ethan sorted laundry in the stifling basement, Kessler cornered him. "Heard your brother's a big shot." He sneered, his bulk blocking the exit. "Bet he'd love to know his baby bro's a fairy." Ethan's fists clenched, but before he could respond, Caleb appeared, his voice cutting through the air like a blade. "Back off, Kessler. Unless you want trouble you can't handle." Kessler laughed but stepped back, his eyes promising worse to come. That night, Ethan couldn't sleep. The cell block was a chorus of snores and restless movement, but all he could hear was Nathan's voice from years ago. "You're not my brother." He wondered what Nathan had done to end up here. Fraud, maybe, or something worse. The not knowing gnawed at him, but so did the memory of Caleb's hand in his, a reminder that he wasn't alone. The next day, Ethan sought Nathan out again, this time in the library. Nathan was flipping through a tattered magazine, his shoulders tense. "We need to talk," Ethan said, sitting across from him. Nathan didn't look up. "Nothing to say." Ethan leaned forward, his voice urgent. "You don't get to do that. Not here. Not after everything." Nathan's hand stilled, and for the first time, Ethan saw something crack in his brother's armor. Guilt, maybe, or regret. But before Nathan could speak, a guard barked for them to move. The moment was gone, but Ethan felt a shift, a sliver of hope that Nathan wasn't beyond reach. Caleb, meanwhile, was becoming Ethan's anchor. In the courtyard, under the guise of sharing a cigarette, they talked about life outside, places they'd go, things they'd do. Caleb wanted to see the Pacific Ocean. Ethan dreamed of a quiet cabin in the mountains. Their words painted a future neither was sure they'd have, but it was enough to keep them going. One evening, as the sun dipped low, Caleb leaned close, his lips brushing Ethan's ear. "When we get out," he whispered, "I'm taking you to that ocean." Ethan's heart swelled, but the weight of Nathan's presence loomed, a reminder that freedom wasn't just about leaving these walls. By the end of the week, Kessler's taunts had escalated. He'd started spreading rumors. Not just about Ethan and Caleb, but about Nathan too, twisting their family rift into something ugly. Ethan knew a storm was coming, and he'd have to face it, with Caleb at his side, and maybe, just maybe, with Nathan too. The thought terrified him, but it also lit a fire. He wasn't the scared kid Nathan had shamed. He was someone new, someone worth fighting for. The air in Haverford grew heavier, as if the prison itself sensed the brewing conflict. Ethan felt it in the stares, the whispered slurs, the way Kessler's crew lingered too long near him and Caleb. But it was Nathan's silence that cut the deepest, a wound Ethan hadn't expected to reopen. He wanted answers, not just about why Nathan was here, but about the hate that had driven them apart. Yet every time he tried to confront his brother, Nathan shut him out, his face a mask of defiance and shame. In the laundry room, Ethan and Caleb worked side by side, the rhythmic hum of machines masking their conversation. "He's your brother, but he's not your keeper," Caleb said, folding a threadbare towel. His hands moved with purpose, but his eyes were soft, searching Ethan's face. "You can't make him change, but you can choose how much you carry." Ethan nodded, but the weight of Nathan's rejection clung to him. He wanted to believe Caleb, to let go of the past, but the boy who'd craved his brother's approval was still inside him, fighting to be heard. That evening, in the courtyard, Ethan caught Nathan alone, sitting on a rusted bench, staring at the ground. Ethan approached, his heart pounding. "Why won't you talk to me?" he demanded, his voice louder than he'd intended. Nathan's head snapped up, his blue eyes flashing. "Because I don't know how," he snapped, then softer. "I don't know how to fix this." Ethan froze, caught off guard by the crack in Nathan's voice. For the first time, he saw his brother not as a bully, but as a man broken by his own choices. Nathan stood, pacing a tight circle. "I'm here for fraud," he admitted, his voice barely audible. "Stole from my company, thought I'd get away with it. Didn't think I'd end up here. With you." Ethan's chest tightened. Fraud didn't fit the Nathan he knew, the golden boy who'd always played by the rules, or at least pretended to. "Why'd you do it?" Ethan asked. Nathan's laugh was bitter. "To prove I was better than you. Better than everyone. Look where that got me." The confession hung between them, raw and jagged. Ethan wanted to scream, to shake Nathan for all the years of pain, but he saw something new in his brother's eyes. Regret, maybe even fear. Before he could respond, Kessler's voice cut through the air. "Well, ain't this sweet?" he sneered, flanked by two of his crew. "Family reunion for the freaks." Ethan's fist clenched, but Nathan stepped forward, his voice low and dangerous. "Leave him alone, Kessler." It wasn't much, but it was the first time Nathan had ever stood up for him. Ethan's heart stuttered, caught between hope and disbelief. The moment shattered when Kessler lunged, shoving Nathan against the bench. Ethan moved to intervene, but Caleb appeared, pulling Ethan back. "Not here," Caleb hissed, his grip firm. The guards broke it up before fists flew, but Kessler's smirk promised more trouble. As they dispersed, Nathan met Ethan's eyes, a silent acknowledgement passing between them. It wasn't forgiveness, but it was a start. Back in their cell block, Ethan and Caleb sat close, their shoulders brushing. Caleb's presence was a steadying force, but Ethan's mind was a storm. "He's not who I thought he was," Ethan said, his voice thick. Caleb's hand found his, hidden beneath a blanket. "People change," Caleb murmured. "Sometimes they just need a push." Ethan leaned into him, drawing strength from the warmth of his touch. In that moment, Haverford's walls felt a little less suffocating. But the prison didn't let hope linger long. The next day, Kessler's crew struck. During a chaotic moment in the mess hall, one of them slipped a shiv into Ethan's bunk, setting him up for a contraband charge. The guards found it during a sweep, and Ethan was dragged to solitary, his protests drowned out by the clang of doors. Alone in the dark, 6x8 cell, Ethan's mind spiraled. He thought of Caleb, of Nathan, of the life he'd dared to imagine. Solitary was meant to break him, but instead, it sharpened his resolve. He wouldn't let Kessler win. He wouldn't let fear win. When he was released 3 days later, pale and shaken, Caleb was waiting. They didn't speak, just sat together in the library, their hands clasped under the table. "I thought I lost you," Caleb whispered, his voice raw. Ethan squeezed his hand, his throat tight. "You won't," he promised. But as he said it, he saw Nathan across the room, watching them. There was no judgment in his brother's eyes this time, just a quiet, conflicted sadness. Ethan knew the road ahead wouldn't be easy. Kessler's crew was still out there, and Nathan's guilt wasn't a promise of redemption. But with Caleb by his side and a fragile bridge forming with his brother, Ethan felt something he hadn't in years, a reason to fight. Not just for survival, but for the life he wanted, the love he deserved, and the family he might still reclaim. Solitary had left Ethan raw, but it also lit a fire in him. Back in the cell block, he moved with a new purpose, his eyes sharper, his steps deliberate. Caleb noticed it immediately. "You're different," he said one morning in the library, his voice a mix of pride and worry. Ethan smiled, a rare, genuine thing. "I'm done being afraid," he said. Of Kessler, of Nathan, of any of it. Caleb's hand brushed his, a silent vow to stand with him, no matter what came next. But Kessler wasn't done. The Shiv incident had only emboldened him, and his crew's taunts grew bolder, their threats more pointed. Ethan and Caleb kept their heads down, but the tension was a live wire, sparking at every turn. Nathan, too, was a wild card. Since their confrontation in the yard, he'd kept his distance, but Ethan caught him watching, sometimes with guilt, sometimes with something softer, like he was trying to understand the brother he'd lost. One evening, during a rare moment of calm in the courtyard, Ethan and Caleb sat on a bench, their knees touching. The sky was a bruise of purple and orange, the kind of sunset that made even Haverford feel human. "When we get out," Caleb said, his voice low, "we're going to find a place where no one cares who we love." Ethan's chest ached with the weight of that dream. He wanted to believe it, but the prison's walls were a constant reminder of how far freedom was. Their moment was shattered by Kessler's voice. "Look at the lovebirds," he mocked, striding toward them with two of his crew. Ethan stood, his heart racing, but his voice steady. "Walk away, Kessler." The older man laughed, but before he could respond, Nathan appeared, his broad frame blocking Kessler's path. "Enough," Nathan said, his voice low and final. Kessler's eyes narrowed, but he backed off, muttering curses. Ethan stared at Nathan, stunned. His brother didn't meet his gaze, just walked away, but the act spoke louder than words. Later, in the library, Ethan cornered Nathan. "Why'd you do that?" he asked, his voice tight with years of hurt. Nathan sighed, rubbing the back of his neck. "Because I'm tired of being the guy who hurts you," he said. "I was wrong, Ethan. Back then and now. I don't know how to make it right, but I'm trying." Ethan's throat burned. He wanted to believe Nathan, but trust was a fragile thing, broken too many times. Caleb, ever the optimist, saw hope where Ethan saw risk. "He's reaching out," Caleb said that night, their hands entwined in the dark of the cell block. "Maybe not the way you want, but he's trying." Ethan nodded, but doubt gnawed at him. Nathan's words were a start, but words weren't enough. Not yet. The next day, disaster struck. During a work detail in the kitchen, Kessler's crew cornered Caleb, away from the guard's eyes. Ethan was across the room when he heard the scuffle, his heart dropping as he saw Caleb pinned against a wall, Kessler's fist raised. Ethan didn't think. He charged, tackling Kessler to the ground. Chaos erupted, shouts and fists flying as guards stormed in. Ethan and Caleb were dragged to solitary, but not before Ethan saw Nathan in the crowd, his face pale with something like fear. Solitary was worse this time, the darkness heavier, the silence louder. Ethan's mind replayed the fight, Caleb's defiant glare, Nathan's shocked expression. He wondered if Nathan would ever understand what it meant to stand up for someone you loved, even when it cost you everything. When Ethan was released, bruised but unbroken, Caleb was waiting, his own stint in solitary, leaving shadows under his eyes. They didn't speak, just held each other in the library's quiet corner, their breaths sinking in a way that felt like defiance. Nathan found them there, his expression unreadable. "I saw what you did," he said to Ethan, his voice low. For him, Ethan braced for judgment, but Nathan's next words caught him off guard. "I'm proud of you." The words were clumsy, raw, but they hit Ethan like a tidal wave. He didn't know how to respond, so he just nodded, his eyes burning. As the days passed, Ethan felt the balance shifting. Kessler's crew backed off, wary of Nathan's unexpected alliance. Ethan and Caleb grew bolder, their love a quiet rebellion against Haverford's cruelty. And Nathan, slowly, started to change. He didn't have all the answers, and neither did Ethan, but they were talking, small, tentative steps towards something new. Ethan didn't know if he could forgive Nathan, but he was starting to believe they could be brothers again, not just in blood, but in heart. The days in Haverford blurred into weeks, each one a battle to hold onto hope. Ethan and Caleb's love grew stronger, forged in stolen glances and whispered promises, but the prison's shadow never lifted. Nathan's presence was a constant reminder of the past, but also a fragile bridge to something better. Ethan didn't know if he could cross it, but he was learning to try. One morning, as Ethan and Caleb sorted books in a library, a guard delivered news that changed everything. Caleb was up for parole. Ethan's heart soared, then sank. Freedom for Caleb meant separation, a future they dreamed of now dangling out of reach. Caleb's face was a mask of conflicting emotions, joy, fear, and something deeper, a love that refused to break. "I'll wait for you," Caleb said, his voice fierce. "Out there, in here, doesn't matter." Ethan nodded, but the thought of losing Caleb's touch, his laugh, was a knife in his chest. Nathan noticed the change in Ethan, the way his shoulders slumped under the weight of Caleb's impending release. In the yard, Nathan approached, his expression hesitant. "You love him," he said, not a question but a statement. Ethan nodded, bracing for judgment. Instead, Nathan said, "I get it now. Why you fought so hard to be yourself." Ethan's breath caught. It wasn't an apology, but it was close, a crack in the wall Nathan had built between them. The parole hearing came faster than Ethan expected. He wasn't allowed to attend, but he sat in his cell, staring at the ceiling, imagining Caleb standing before the board, his green eyes steady. When Caleb returned, his smile said it all. He was getting out. They stole a moment in the library, their hands clasped tight. 6 months, Caleb said, his voice breaking. "Then I'm coming back for you." Ethan kissed him, quick and desperate, not caring who saw. It was a promise sealed in defiance, a vow that Haverford couldn't break. But Kessler hadn't forgotten them. On Caleb's last day, as they said goodbye in the courtyard, Kessler's crew struck. It was a calculated ambush, hidden in the chaos of a shift change. Ethan saw the glint of a shiv and shoved Caleb out of the way, taking the blow meant for him. Pain seared through his side, hot and blinding, as he fell to the ground. Caleb's scream echoed, and then Nathan was there, tackling Kessler's accomplice, his fists flying with a fury Ethan had never seen. The guards swarmed, dragging everyone apart. Ethan was rushed to the infirmary, his vision fading as Caleb's voice called his name. When he woke, bandaged and sore, Nathan was at his bedside, his face pale. "You could have died," Nathan said, his voice shaking. For him, Ethan managed a weak smile. "Worth it," he whispered. Nathan's eyes glistened, and for the first time, Ethan saw his brother. Not the bully, not the fraud, but a man trying to make things right. Caleb was gone by the time Ethan was released from the infirmary, his parole pushed through despite the chaos. Ethan felt the loss like a physical ache, but Caleb's letters arrived weekly, filled with plans for their future, a house by the ocean, a life without walls. Nathan, too, was changing. He started joining Ethan in the library, their conversations tentative but real. Nathan spoke of his regrets, his fear of failing their family, his struggle to accept Ethan's truth. "I was wrong," Nathan said one day, his voice steady, "and I'll spend the rest of my life proving I'm better than that." Ethan's sentence stretched on, but the prison felt different now. Kessler's crew, shaken by Nathan's stand and the guards' crackdown, kept their distance. Ethan carried Caleb's letters like a talisman, each one a reminder of the world waiting outside. And Nathan, once his greatest enemy, became his ally, their bond rebuilt on honesty and time. When Ethan's own parole hearing came, 2 years later, he walked out of Haverford a free man. Caleb was waiting, his green eyes brighter than Ethan remembered. They fell into each other's arms, the weight of the past lifting in that single, perfect moment. Nathan, still serving his sentence, had written Ethan a letter, promising to find him when he was free. "You're my brother," Nathan had written. "Always will be." Ethan and Caleb moved to a small coastal town, their days filled with the sound of waves and the freedom to love openly. The scars of Haverford remained, but so did the lessons of courage, of forgiveness, of love that refused to break. Ethan had come out in prison, but he'd found more than his truth. He'd found a future, a family, and a brother who, against all odds, had learned to love him back.